Hello folks, this is Inside the Chambers and I am your host, Chris Chambers. We are coming to you once again from Davidoff of Geneva here in Tampa, Florida. So our series of video podcasts, as we're approaching that November 3rd date, I want to feature local candidates so you as a voter can be informed when you mail in or approach that ballot box on November the 3rd. So I have a very special guest this week, is Mike Perotti, who is running for a state attorney for the 13th Judicial Circuit. I think it's one of the most important offices that you'll see on your ballot when you go make your decision on November 3rd or prior to. And hopefully by the end of this video podcast, you'll know why. So Mike, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure to be here, Chris. Thank you.
All right. So Mike, please tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and what led you to make the decision of running for state attorney.
Well, Chris, I'm a third generation Tampa native and have been fortunate enough to go to school here locally at Jesuit High School and then go to the University of Florida for my undergrad and stay there for law school. And I started my career here in Tampa as a young prosecutor, working under then Harry Lee Coe and then Mark Ober back in the late 90s and early 2000s. And I've never really known what to expect out of a career, but you follow the path and you keep doing whatever doors open in front of you.
Right.
And through my career, then I've had the opportunity, whether it's been working as in-house counsel for the sheriff's office or having my own law firm, we're representing clients in all sorts of causes of action on both sides of the equation, both plaintiffs and defendants, civil and criminal, and then having about an 8-year opportunity to be a jail commander, where as a major or a colonel I ran the jails for Hillsborough County. I've spent my entire career in community service. I mean, truly in protecting and serving this place I call home. I've always called home, always will call home. And so we came to a point over the last year or so, having that background, having that unique exposure, where I've literally now been involved in every single part of our criminal justice system here locally, and looking at the different challenges that lie ahead for us, the things we're not doing so well, the things that we're doing pretty good but maybe could do better, looking at the rift between our community and law enforcement in some ways, looking at the rift between different components within our justice system, and recognizing that it was time for me to try to offer what I could to this position and put my name in the hat, so to speak, because I do believe that somebody who's a proven leader, who's actually done the job from all different angles and understands both the benefits and the perils of our criminal justice system, is what we need in our community right now in order to ensure the safety and the protection and the justice for everybody that lives here.
Okay. Just listen to your background. You have a unique and impressive background. I can't think of a state attorney who might have all that experience that bring to the table. I think one of the positions you held as colonel over the detention system here, one of the largest detention systems in the state of Florida, if not the country, I think that brings a unique perspective stepping into that state attorney's position. And you hear a lot of talk about criminal justice reform. So can you talk about your experience overseeing that the detention system and how that can help you bring about true criminal justice reform when you're in the state attorney's seat? Yeah,
well, absolutely, Chris. So understand, I'd been an attorney my whole life, and then one day I was called down to the front office and was asked by then Sheriff G if I would be willing to go to the academy, become certified as a detention deputy, and then they desired to deploy me into the jail as a major, to become a commander. And that's obviously bizarre. That's not how you do that. That's not the way that works normally. But we've been having some issues in the jail back in the late 2000s with some adverse events, and what they saw as some leadership and accountability issues. And for whatever reason, they believed that I had the philosophy, the mindset that they needed to try and affect some changes in there. So I deployed in 2010 as a major in the jail divisions, and I can tell you that experience for the next 6 years as a major, then a year and a half as a colonel, it's transformative. Because it's one thing to be a prosecutor that takes people's freedoms away. It's another thing to be a defense attorney that's trying to protect people from the accusations against them. It's entirely a third to run the facility where you are seeing men and women deprived of their freedom and liberty for any of a number of charges, both minor and atrocious. I mean, you know, awful things that they're committed. And it gives you a front row, down and dirty opportunity to see what is or isn't working in our system. I can tell you, when I was running, there were 3,000 inmates in that jail at any given time. When I was the commander. And Chris, the vast majority of them, I'd say 2,000, 2,500 of them, they're not bad people. They're not necessarily good decision makers. They choose poorly. They see themselves as having diminishing options, and that lack of alternative, lack of options, lack of good decision making gets them stuck in this pattern of lifestyle and behavior that lends itself to criminality. Now, aside from that group, there is a portion in there, they are dangerous. They are willing, able, and at a moment's notice, capable of hurting somebody in the community, hurting one of our deputies, whatever the case might be. But when you're in there running that and spending time talking to them, because I do it all the time, I just go around and chat with the inmates. What's going on? How'd you get here? What's happening? What's not? You start to learn the human side of this. You start to know, at any given time, there's several hundred people sitting in that jail that don't need to be there. Okay. They're in there because they can't rub two quarters together to post a small bond on a nonviolent crime. And Chris, that kind of thing could have changed years ago. Correct. We could have, with the right partnerships and the right leadership locally, worked with the judiciary, worked with the defense bar, worked with the public defender's office, and brought about legitimate change to our bail mechanisms. Not no bail now. To me, that's insanity. Yeah, the idea of taking away a cash component.
A lot of people's pushing that these days.
Yeah, no, bad idea.
All right.
Bad idea, Gene.
Agreed.
I don't know if you saw that Saturday Night Live skit. It's a bad idea, Gene situation. However, the notion of recognizing that when you've got somebody who doesn't have a violent history, isn't a flight risk, isn't looking to hurt anybody, and isn't on there on some sort of a relatively minor crime, and we can do more to try and get those folks out on their own recognizance. Correct. Try and give them an opportunity to not lose a job, not do that. And I can say all that as a Republican candidate who is still 100% about holding dangerous actors accountable and not giving an inch on making sure that my public is saved. Correct. You can do both. Correct. And when you run a jail, you see that. You see that reality. And you also see law enforcement. You see the human side of the men and women wearing the badge, and what you learn is they're not perfect. Okay. Law enforcement makes mistakes, and when you're a leader within law enforcement, you become aware that there's a time where you need to acknowledge and find ways to correct undesirable behavior or bad decision making by the men and women who wear the badge, and that's something very important that our community needs right now. Definitely, I definitely agree. You know, when you talk to criminal justice reform and some of the ideas you brought up, I think that can definitely help change the trajectory and kind of quiet down the demands of the community nationwide as a whole right now. You know, sometimes I feel, even me as an African American male, I'm a little bit detached from a lot what goes on in regards to the criminal justice system and the reform. You know, about a year ago I watched this, you ever seen this documentary called Free Meek? Called Free Meek? No. Okay. So short story. So it's about this rapper named Meek Mill. I do know Meek Mill. So now okay. And he committed an offense when he was 17, 18. Spent almost a year in jail awaiting a court date, and eventually, you know, got time served. But he was on probation for 11 freaking years. And the other part about that, the cops who arrested him, by the time he finally ended up getting off probation, and he had violation of probation numerous times through that, but by the time it was all said and done at the end of this 11 year, all those cops who arrested him, they had either been fired or in jail for corruption, served their time and scot-free. So just watching that, it was... Is this LA? This was Philadelphia. Philly, okay. Philadelphia. So watching that, and it's so much more to the story, I encourage you to watch it. I think it should be a requirement for any state attorney or anybody running, but watch that, you kind of see the flaws of our criminal justice system. But when I saw that, I was like, wow, you know, I think America is the best country in the world, but we definitely have some areas to improve upon and some opportunities. Because it's run by humans, and that's where you've got to have appropriate checks and balances and make sure that your driving force is always appropriate, right? It's not just about winning a case. It's not just about putting somebody behind bars. It is delivering justice.
Correct.
And if you're about delivering justice to your community, that takes all different shapes and sizes and formats.
Absolutely.
The notion of keeping somebody on some perpetual probation that lasts over a decade, I start automatically wrinkling my forehead because that's not really what that's intended to do.
Correct.
Probation is an alternative to incarceration when you believe that there is an opportunity to get somebody's attention and rehabilitate them without taking away their freedom completely.
All right.
But there becomes diminishing returns when you start doing it for some outrageous amount of time, and you got to go back and ask yourself why. And again, one of the things I was able to do when I was working as a major in the jail at that point in time was I created the new misdemeanor probation program for Hillsborough County. The Salvation Army was backing out. I was asked to step in at the 11th hour and create a program to be run by the sheriff's office. And even an exercise like that, what I can tell you is there are so many opportunities to have more constructive supervision over folks that actually will help them while making a difference in their future decision making and getting their attention too, because there's both a punitive and a rehabilitation nature to criminal justice, right? It's a little bit of both. And then we don't use it. We put people on probation, you do some community service hours, and you got to pay $50 each month and stay out of trouble. What is that doing to actually try to open your eyes that the kind of behavior we're engaging in doesn't have to be what you choose next time, truly?
Correct.
But where am I giving you an incentive to behave differently? And we do not need to be locking up people that could serve the interest of the community better by being out and employed. And we do not need to be giving a free pass in letting go the ones who are bent on committing harms and creating dangers. And that's what Tampa community right now, the shootings are through the roof. The gun violence is escalating. I'm not okay with that. And that's not happening by accident.
Correct.
And we've got to be very honest about the challenges facing our community right now.
Okay. And you brought up an interesting number. You said the jail keeps about 3,000 inmates. So when Andrew Warren ran his platform a few years ago was criminal justice reform. But if the jails, that population is staying the same, are we seeing criminal justice reform? I think it's a little lower now due to coronavirus, but
it is.
Are we really seeing that? And like you said, we have people in jail who don't supposed to be in there, and that's causing the taxpayers a large amount.
It is. And so I'll add hard numbers to what you're talking about. If the idea is to ensure, now mind you, I'm not running as a justice reform candidate. I'm running as a do the right thing candidate. I'm running a common sense business principles, not politics candidate.
Right.
But if I was running as a justice reform candidate, and one of the primary pushes is to not have people incarcerated unnecessarily, I can tell you from 2010 when I became a major, all the way until March of 2020, the jail population in Hillsborough County didn't change by more than 100 or 200 inmates one way or the other.
Okay.
And it would fluctuate up and down depending on the time of year, quite frankly. Goes up a little bit during the summer because whatever, the heat, I'm not sure. So, but you always had around 3,000 give or take inmates. If we now go to the coronavirus time frame, what you saw was a joint effort by the key players in our justice system deciding, you know what, for these nonviolent, not serious charge offenders who have low bonds amount, let's just go ahead and ROR them and not keep them in jail. So I will tell you, from March until now, as we sit here today, the jail population has stayed at or below about 2,600. Was it 3,000? Now it's at 2,600, below 2,600.
Okay.
So let's do the math, Chris. Since we now know for a fact that could be done simply by a meeting of the minds at any point in time prior to March 2020. Let's go back to January 2017 then, 4 years ago, almost 4 years ago. If that simple common sense approach had been implemented then,
Okay.
the average daily cost to house an inmate is $130 a day, give or take.
Wow.
400 inmate lower population per day times $130 a day times 365 days in a year for 4 years. Do you know what the savings would be passed on to the taxpayer? Because I'll do the math for you right now. $75 million.
Wow.
You want to talk about being fiscally responsible and protecting your public and doing what what you promise to do, what you're talking about is smart business. What we could have done with freeing up a $75 million expense by not housing 400 extra inmates every day for the last 4 years. Whoa. You could have then taken that money, put it towards more community resources for the children, more community centers, more parks, more mental health options for your community, more training for law enforcement on dealing with crisis intervention. I mean, we could sit here for 3 hours talking about all the
$75 million.
We could have done with $75 million
wow.
from one person just stepping up and going, these folks don't have to be in here. We can redo this a little bit.
Right.
And one of the things that I know that I can bring to the table and will bring to bear is, I've 22 years in this county now, working at the highest levels. I've now worked in the inner sanctum for 3 different sheriffs. Worked for and with multiple chief judges. I know the judges, I know the chief judge, I know the defense bar, I know Julie Holt in the public defender's office. And I trust in my capacity, based on my relationship with them, to when it's time to sit down with them, when it's time to sit down with the sheriff, when it's time to sit down with the chief of police or the mayor. They know me, they understand my background, that I'm a person of my word, of integrity, and that if we are going to sit at a table and try to find a solution, we are doing so as partners, not as adversaries, not as political opponents, not as a political operative. Because I'm not sent from somewhere to come here and do a bidding. I'm literally here my whole life to try and protect my community. And I think that's a very exciting opportunity that the voters will have a chance to do something with.
No, it definitely is. Definitely, you brought up some great points in that. So for those just tuning in, this is Inside the Chambers. I am your host, Chris Chambers. We are coming to you from the beautiful Davidoff of Geneva here in Tampa, Florida. Our special guest today is Mike Perotti, who is running for state attorney for the 13th Judicial Circuit. So let's get back into it, Mike. So the state attorney and the sheriff are the 2 constitutional offices that's required on the ballot. And I think one could argue that the state attorney might be the most important, because a sheriff or the police chief or whoever, they can arrest all the people they want. But if the state attorney is dropping charges, you have a revolving door in that criminal justice system. Andrew Warren, he took a lot of heat a couple months back during the protests or riots for dropping charges on 67 protesters. How would you have handled that? Would you handle that a little bit differently, and can you expound on that?
Well, first of all, I want to agree with you. In my opinion, the state attorney is the single most important, empowered elected official in the county, at least how it's structured in the state of Florida, because it's unfettered. I mean, it's really the complete discretion to determine how to dispense justice, in our case in Hillsborough County, for 1.2 million people. And nobody can make the state attorney bring a charge they don't want to, and nobody can stop the state attorney, truly, can stop the state attorney from deciding not to proceed with the case if they choose not to. Broad, sweeping power. It's why certain folks out there on the political horizon from other areas have made such a push to try to get their own hand-picked candidates into these positions, because they understand how much it can immediately change the very nature and culture within a community. But to answer the question, here's been my frustration. You go all the way back to May, when we were on the heels of the George Floyd death, and anger was fomenting within communities around the nation and here at home in Hillsborough County. Leaders in those difficult times, especially when you're talking about public safety, have to step up and be at the very front of those events.
Correct.
Generating dialogues with both those who are angry and those who are afraid at what that anger might cause. And you lead from that position of strength, of compassion, with clear directives on what we will tolerate and what's going to happen next. So I believe that from day one, as the state attorney, what you could have expected from me anyways, it would be setting the tone, saying, listen, I'm a constitutionalist. I will always protect every single one of your constitutional rights, including your right to be angry, to have a grievance with your law enforcement partners, to be angry with the way justice is being delivered or not delivered in your community from your perspective. And I will protect that. I will make sure you have a park. I will make sure you have a platform. I will make sure nobody bothers you. However, the First Amendment does not give you the right or create the opportunity for you to endanger yourself or others, to begin harming the community, to destroy the community, to begin burning, looting, all that other terrible stuff that starts to happen. And I think that if you have that conversation at square one that says, I hear you, I got you, I understand what you're mad about, by the way. And if as opposed to going and shouting in a park, if you actually want to come to a table real quick and let's see if we can hash out what's actually wrong, because I think I already have a good idea, and what we can do to fix it, it's a far better use of everybody's time.
Correct.
But you look at the way that happened, and obviously May 31st was the terrible night out on Fowler Avenue, and the sheriff was out there, the chief of police was out there, the mayor was out there, I was out there from 9:30 to 2:30 in the morning. Your state attorney wasn't out there. Then we turned to the specific event that you were talking about, and that was after curfews had been implemented. There had been protesting all day long down around Curtis Dixon Park, and hours had gone by post-curfew.
Correct.
And the group was growing a little louder and a little more agitated. There were allegations that some things had been thrown at the police from one or more of them. But you got to a very critical, significant moment where the chief of police, acting in concert with the mayor, decided we need to shut this down right now because it's about to turn. And if you've spent any time around protests and you know anything about them, that is absolutely a fundamental, real nature of protest. They can go from peaceful to not peaceful
very
quickly. And all it takes is a couple people kind of instigating in a moment a response and then a reaction. And before you know it, you're not ever putting the lid back on that at that point in time. So they made that decision. Once again, I note the state attorney wasn't out there. And so I then 2-3 weeks later, whatever it was, the article comes out that charges are being dropped on 67 peaceful protesters that were arrested out in downtown Tampa that night. And the only thought that goes through my mind, Chris, is the following. If in fact the chief of police and the mayor were wrong and didn't need to arrest 67 people, then maybe that would have been a good time and a good place for some strong leadership from the state attorney's office to be there to talk them out of it and to suggest to them that's not a good route. I'm not going to, just so you know, I'm not going to prosecute these. I don't believe that there's a basis to go forward with it. It's not appropriate. It's not necessary. Whatever it is, have that conversation at square one, moment one, because maybe 67 people don't take a ride that wasn't necessary. Don't get a charge that gets dropped weeks later.
Correct.
On the other hand, maybe the chief and the mayor were right when they made that decision, and had you been out there to see it and appreciate it with your own eyes, putting yourself in harm's way where you belong, by the way. You are a badge-carrying member of the justice system. You are supposed to put yourself in harm's way at the most difficult, most terrifying moments, because that's how you make informed decisions about what's going on. And that's how I see that differently. And I think that leaders lead at the most critical times, true leaders. They put themselves where they need to be, even when the temperature is up and things are complicated and difficult, because if they're truly leaders, they have the capacity in that moment to redirect the flow of traffic, to redirect the outcomes.
Awesome. I've said this before on the show. You look at the protest, and I like to think in any city, whether, and I've said this before, Democrat or Republican ran, I think it's on the verge of civil unrest based on the decision of any police officer. I mean, even...
That's a fair statement.
Even we saw the riots here based on what happened with George Floyd. And you're seeing this happen more and more often. I mean, some cities have been protesting every night. And I recently up in Rochester, New York, from a situation that happened a couple months ago, the entire police command resigned.
I saw that.
Retired.
I saw that.
So as state attorney, what actions, policies could you help implement to ensure that the law enforcement agencies here are making those right decisions to prevent something from like that happening here in Tampa? And in some situations, you can't prevent it, so it don't even have to happen here, and we deal with that byproduct of that. So what policies, based on your experience, would you put in place?
So a couple things, Chris. First of all, Not all communities are the same. We know that, right? Because we're seeing what's going on in Portland versus what's going on in Tampa.
Correct.
And while we've had our share of difficulties and some dangerous moments and some unrest, it's nothing like what we saw happen there. Right. So what that tells us, what that gives us complete certainty about, is that we do have the capacity to control our own future here locally. I mentioned earlier that what I believe is one of the most important things that any leader in a community like Tampa or any place else has to have is the respect and the relationships with your peers in the decision-making levels of that community. I can't, as the state attorney, make or force the chief of police or the sheriff conduct their business in a particular way, right? I can't call up the sheriff and say, hey, sheriff, from now on, I want you doing it this way. But I can lead conversations hand in hand with the members of the community. And I don't mean the members of the community that donate, and the members of the community that are wealthy, and the members of the community that are my next door neighbor, you know, living already and being friends with everybody who's connected in town. I mean the leaders of the most affected communities who are seen within that community as somebody with a voice, somebody with a passion, somebody who understands the struggles of that area. And if I'm in a position to bring them to the table and give effect and power to their voice, and that then with my bridging abilities, allow that to resonate with the decision makers and law enforcement, to perhaps implement a new, more comprehensive, stronger partnership idea of how law enforcement services will be delivered in those communities, so that you can renew the trust and the rapport with the community.
Correct.
And then I, as the state attorney, follow that up and ensure that we are giving people who deserve a second chance, and getting the dangerous actors from within those communities truly off the street corners, because they live in fear from those folks. They know who they are. They also just know that if the reality is telling on them or turning them in doesn't do anything except to ensure that they'll be back on the same street corner 36 to 70, 48, 72 hours later, with impunity, you're going to stop talking. And you're just going to have to deal with that danger, deal with that harm. If I, as the state attorney, ensure that we have transparency and equity, and that we're getting proper outcomes, and that we are truly working hard to keep the dangerous criminals off the street, while creating viable solutions within the community, for the community, by the community. To me, that's how you fix this. That is how you regain trust. And I start off with the first movement has to start by the men and women who wear a badge, including the Office of State Attorney. A badge, you took an oath of office. A portion of your community believes that you have not upheld that oath to one extent or another. Don't argue with them about it.
All right.
Hear them, understand it, and go sit at the table and listen, and then you make the first open, bold changes and suggestions about what you can do on my behalf from the state attorney's office, what things I can implement to ensure that you are getting justice delivered regardless of the color of your skin or the number of $20 bills you got in your wallet at a given time. That is what the community deserves and expects and demands, and we are obligated to give it to them. So I believe that somebody with the powerful role like state attorney can play the hub in reestablishing and fixing and bringing back together that community where everybody feels safe, feels represented, and yet you're sending a clear message to the bad actors, I'm coming for you.
Correct.
And they're coming behind me now because I'm coming with the community. They don't want you there anymore either.
Okay. You know, Mike, that response, that's what impresses me so much about you is, you know, you see a lot of candidates running for office, no matter state attorney or whatever, but you see a lot of they shift to one side where I'm looking out for us. It's us or me against them. And your plan, your strategy is the community as a whole, no matter if you're Republican or Democrat, you know, the color of your skin. And that's what I think somebody in that state attorney's holding that position should definitely have a clear understanding of that.
Chris, if you're a public servant, you serve the public.
Correct.
My public in this county is 1.2 plus million people. Whatever the number's up to today, it's growing by the week. I serve every single one of them, whether they're the most vile offender or the most wonderful human being that there is, whether they agree with my political ideologies or not, whether they wave a Confederate flag or they wave a Black Lives Matter flag. I serve all of them, which means I have to listen and try to understand at least the perspective that each one of them brings to bear. I may not agree with them. I may sit down and go, okay, everything you're saying is really, really messed up. But okay, I hear you. I've got to try to figure out a way to ensure that this community does not rip itself apart.
Right.
Does not continue this incredible polarization of ideas where you've got to, it's either an us or them, or you're either with us or against us, because that's not how problems get solved. That's not how solutions get created. So yeah, if you hear a very problem-solving oriented, common sense, right and wrong versus political narratives tone coming out of me, that's not by coincidence, Chris. That is what you owe the people that voted you into that office.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I'm going to talk about some of the shooting. You know, every 4 years when there's, you know, coming up for re-election, the state attorney says, well, crime is down, crime is down. But when you cut on the news or read the newspaper, you see there's an alarming number of shootings taking place in Tampa, Hillsborough County, particularly with our minority juveniles. And it seems like these young people don't have any direction. They're going out there shooting, no regard for life. So what do you think is the issue there, and how can that get corrected?
Well, the issue is so multi-layered and complicated. It is one of the greatest challenges facing not just our present but our future, because you know, the reality is in some of our most at-risk communities, the common denominators you see are usually a role model, father figure, strong parental figure is not around for one reason or another. So you have young children that don't have the benefit of strong parenting or strong mentoring going on. That then, unfortunately, because we've got public schooling issues in our community, and we're not alone, this is not something new that just plagues Hillsborough County. The same schools in the same most challenged neighborhoods year after year get F ratings, D and F ratings. So you're coming from a difficult home situation, then you're at a school that is struggling to get your attention, to provide you the same resources that might be someplace else in the community. And you end up where? In the park, on the street corner, nowhere in particular, with nobody in particular caring what you're doing far too often. And so what do? You see the other, you know, slightly older generations right ahead of you, and in far too many tragic situations, the only folks that in some cases they're seeing that have any sense of self-determination or power or strength or capacity to call their own shots is quite possibly somebody who's up to no good. They have found an alternate method of getting by and getting their own, and that becomes the role model. And so, you know, I think that there's a comprehensive and holistic and very realistic conversation that has to take place, because you have to be able to start providing more resources within the community. And I'm not just talking about resources from education, I'm not talking about resources from housing, I'm talking about resources from mentoring programs, resources from being able to try to get the attention of a 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old before they've derailed themselves. And you know, I believe that there are certainly opportunities for kids to make mistakes. You've got to find a way to get their attention without altering their life. Correct. To the point where now you've labeled them as a criminal and they can't bounce back. But let's make that opportunity then to get their attention, let's make it meaningful. Let's not just say you're on some sort of probation and you got to check in and stay out of trouble, otherwise we're releasing you to mom, grandma, stepdad, whoever the case might be, dad. We're going to release you to whoever, and don't get any more trouble, and we'll see you next time.
Correct.
What'd you do to change that person's thinking? Nothing.
You just enable that revolving door.
There was no real repercussion for the bad action. What's going to differentiate their decision making 6 months from then, a year later, and then we wonder why we see this same pattern and cycle of a child that gets in trouble here and never stops, and now are committing very serious crimes as adults, and now it's the pipeline that you talked about, right? If you want to derail that, get in there early, and in some cases before there's actually even been a criminal endeavor yet, Find the ones that are lacking the parental guidance. Find the ones lacking the mentoring. Get them the mentoring. Deliver it to them. Work with the local churches to round up 10, 20 kids. Let me walk you through an empty pod over at Orient Road Jail. No inmates around. We don't have to have you exposed to inmates. Let me walk you through over there and see what it's like.
Okay.
How much you're about to lose if you choose to make those decisions. And that's the lifestyle that you want to have. Dressed in a uniform you don't want, eating food you don't want to eat, being told what to do 24 hours a day, and having no freedom and individual choice on there. That might make a mark. And then team up with somebody who's already made mistakes but got lucky and came out of it, and get them as a mentor in the program. There's so many opportunities to do that, but we've got to all get there together. If we can't derail that, then we're due for more of the same for the next
Right.
10, 20, 30 years. And that is dangerous, because I've seen the same news stories you have, the same video footage you have. There's nothing more disheartening and difficult to watch than a youngster that should be playing outside and enjoying their childhood, living a life of survival.
Right.
And having such disregard for their own well-being and the well-being of anybody else that's out there, carrying around 22s and 38s and 32s in their pocket like I used to carry around a toy cap gun.
Correct.
That's sad. That is sad, and that's something that we need to take the blinders off and open our eyes wide open and start having real conversations about.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think, these kids, they need some type of purpose or meaning in their life. I remember speaking to a group of kids a while back, and I tell them, I said, 13, decisions you make today will affect your grandchildren. Think about that.
It's a fact.
And definitely some type of intervention is needed to get them on the right track.
Intervention. Well, one of the things I talked about with juvenile justice reform, and I think first one thing that has happened in the last few years is being far more selective on charging juveniles as adults.
Correct.
I believe that can be abused. It can get excessive. Hillsborough County, had very, very high numbers of that, and I don't know that that's a good idea. I think that being a little bit more careful in ensuring that you're not overcharging juveniles as adults. If they're not committing violent crimes,
Correct.
truly hurting somebody, crimes of violence, crimes of threatened violence, if we haven't gotten there, I really don't want to see kids charged as adults. I prefer to try to handle them in a juvenile component. But if you're going to do that, as much as possible, but if you're going to do that, that's what I'm saying, give it some meat on the bones. That's why I want the partnerships with the leaders of the community. Because when I get a juvenile and put them on probation or some sort of now protocol that I want them to be on to try to change their thought process, you're going to go back and you're going to talk to Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so who lives 2 blocks from you, because they're going to tell you what lot you're cleaning up, what graffiti you're removing, what community service hours you're doing. They're going to help redirect and be part of the decision making for what mentor you're going to start working with, what big brother, big sister is going to start snatching you up and changing your ways. Because then when you start thumbing your nose at that as a 14, 15-year-old kid,
Right.
and you're letting everybody down, now when I snatch you back up and start being heavy-handed with you, nobody from the community is surprised anymore.
Yeah.
Because we gave you the chance. We tried to get through you, and you continued to do dumb things and dangerous things, but that's earning the respect and the trust of the community because you're working with the community, not against the community.
Okay.
It's with their permission, it's with their support, it's with their full knowledge. So when those bad actors continue to well up now, they're picking up the phone and saying, hey, come get this one, we give. They're not listening anymore.
Correct.
And then you're just left to try to deal with them and whatever's left. But getting the community back in and having them be on board and part of the decision making is critical.
Okay.
100%.
I definitely agree. Folks, if you're just tuning in, this is Inside the Chambers. I'm your host, Chris Chambers, coming to you from Davidoff of Geneva here in Tampa, Florida. Today, our special guest is Mike Perotti, who's running for state attorney of the 13th Judicial Circuit of Hillsborough County. We've had a great conversation, Mike, and I want to talk about recently at a Hillsborough Commissioner their meeting, Les Miller, he made a comment. He said that about the racial tension happening in America right now. And he stated, this county and this state and this country is on the verge of some very, very serious racial divide. But what's your thought on that? Do you think that's pretty accurate, or maybe what's your thoughts on that?
I'm not going to bother trying to speak for all the other jurisdictions, states, counties, cities that I'm not part of and that I'm not running for.
Okay.
In Hillsborough County, we don't have to be if we don't want it to be.
Correct.
There are forces at work and there are individuals at work who would probably like to stoke and continue to create some of that divide, some of that anger, some of that animosity. The only way to counter that is to be able to reach out and connect with all of the interested parties in your community, down to from the most vocal to the most quiet interested party, and remind everybody we're not defined by the color of our skin. We are created by our experiences, and our experiences are very different.
Okay.
But we are all from Tampa. We are all from Hillsborough County. We all want to love this place, want to believe in this place, and it's all up to us to build it together. And I think if we choose at a local level to have that be the conversation, the mindset, the notion, let's talk about solutions, let's talk about things we can change today. Let's talk about ideas we have to put into place for changes that we can work towards 6 months from now and a year from now. If we just have that and let that be the flavor of the day, day after day, then disappointments or letdowns that happen abroad don't ripple the same way here locally, because we realize that we're the masters of our own fate here, right? We choose our own destiny for Hillsborough County, and if we lead that way, and if we lead with strength, and we lead with compassion, and we lead with an appreciation for every gripe that's out there, there's a legitimate component to it. Okay. Quit saying there's not. And folks, that has to happen, by the way. I don't care what your experience has been. Every person who has a frustration or a personal experience that to them has demonstrated a failure of a system or a portion of the government or they have the right to express that frustration and disappointment. And there's going to be some, I have not found one that didn't have some level of validity. Now, whether or not that becomes the end-all be-all is why you have the conversation.
Correct.
Because human beings will make a mistake in a moment. A cop, a person wearing a badge, may do something reprehensible in a moment. Acknowledge it, call it what it is, come together as a community and as the leaders of the community and as law enforcement in the community, and figure out what we can do to prevent that from ever happening again in that same way, but with full open discourse about it, with full transparency about it, and not by embellishing, not by catering to the news, not by pandering to this side and making a bunch of empty promises, not by overreacting. Correct. Right? You can't overreact to a thing, you can't underreact to a thing. Don't bury it, don't sweep it under the rug, don't act like it didn't happen. But I believe this community, Hillsborough County, is so unique because we're so diverse, and we have so many transient folks, transplants. There's a good number of us that are from Tampa. I'm third generation Tampa kid, so I know there's still a lot of people that are right here from Tampa, have been from Tampa, will always be from Tampa. But we have a very diverse community with all this tremendous background and perspective to bring to bear. If we actually harness that correctly, and you'll get a very cool outcome. You will get something very, very worthwhile, and let that guide the narrative. Let that, we're all different, and yet for this purpose, we're all going to be the same. Correct. Because everybody wants the same thing. You want to be safe, you want to be treated fairly, you want to ensure that your government is representing you. Right. Your tax money is not going to waste. I don't care what color you are. I don't care what side of town you live on. Basic rights. Everybody wants that.
Yep.
Not unreasonable.
I totally agree. I totally agree. Folks, if you're just tuning in, this is Inside the Chambers. I'm your host, Chris Chambers. Find us on Facebook, like us, share us with your friends, tell everybody about it. Today, our guest is Michael Perotti, running for state attorney. So Mike, as we come to a close, in a minute or less, what's that elevator pitch? Why should the voters of Hillsborough County vote for you as state attorney?
Minute or less, huh? Okay, we'll try this.
I mean, they've had a good few minutes.
They've had a few minutes. If their ears aren't bleeding yet, they're in for the long haul. Look, I told you I'm a constitutionalist. I think it's one of those brilliant documents ever written. When you follow its core tenets, its purpose correctly. I believe that our democracy is that thing that makes our country so great and so unique. In order to have a democracy, you have to have voters taking the time to become informed and taking the time to ensure that they are putting people in positions of power that are truly of them and serve their interests.
Right.
They don't serve a machine, they don't serve a political interest, they don't serve a party, they don't serve a lobbying, no, they serve the community. I believe around this country, because I watch the same news channels that you all do, there are far too many examples of politicians that by all appearances seem to do a much better job of serving their own interests and their own financial well-being or the interest of a bigger party or a machine rather than doing what's right for their community. Folks, Chris, I'm from this community. I'm never leaving this community. I'm only doing this and willing to become the politician I swore that I'd never be because I truly believe I can do it without becoming beholden to something bigger than this community. I answer to the 1.2 million people that live here. I will always be appreciative of all those that voted for me and those that didn't, because you know what? They're my clients too. They're my citizens as well. I believe it's time for folks that put that type of emphasis first. Under my leadership as a state attorney, victims, their needs, their rights, their interests will always be top priority. True transparency, true open discourse with the public will always be the mandate, and I will not be hard to find. I believe leaders should lead from the front, and I believe that when things get complicated and difficult, whether we're talking about social unrest or we're talking about the need for significant reform or bold, visionary, forward-looking changes, I believe that you've got to have somebody that loves this county more than themselves and more than anybody else making those decisions. And that's what I'll bring to bear. That's what I will promise everybody. And it's important. You're talking about the most significant, most powerful constitutional officer in this county as far as I'm concerned. It's the one that ensures your streets are safe, ensures that your homes are safe and your families are safe, and ensures that somebody you love gets accused of something, that they're treated fairly and that they get the opportunities they deserve to have a fair hearing, to have fair outcomes, to get a second chance. They deserve it. So if you want somebody that's going to be principles and not politics, somebody that's going to call it like it is and speak the truth and not get beholden to other things, I'm your guy. I don't know how many minutes that was, but there you go. It's as short as I can make it.
That was perfect. Mike, once again, thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
So, like I said when we first started, that I think this position is one of the most important that's going to be on the ballots this fall. So there's a little background. That's a little information about Mike Perotti. My goal is to inform the voters so you can make a well-informed decision, and I think we've done that today. So, Mike, thank you again. Thank you all for tuning in. Inside the Chambers, coming to you from Davidoff. Check us out every Thursday at 7 p.m. Like us, share us on Facebook, tell all your friends about it, and
please, if you want to also like Mike Perotti on Facebook, feel free to go do that too. You can find me on Facebook and www.mikeperotti.com. And if you want to send me an email and ask me a question, you can tell I'm not afraid to talk. So go ahead and ask me whatever you got to ask me, and I'll give you the best answer I can. And if I don't know the answer, we'll tell it together. We'll go find it out, and we'll figure out what it is. And thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And one last plug. That's one thing I like about Mike. Very responsive. You reach out to him, he'll definitely get back to you. So shameless plug.
True.
So thank you again for tuning in. This is Inside the Chambers. I'm your host, Chris Chambers, and we are